Yo, Equidio 212, complex.
DPS, go. Inco, go. PUS, go. Surgeon, go. Booster, go. Copy that. We have a go from you guys.
This is Talking Sound.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome once again to the Talking Sound podcast, the only podcast on the internet where -10 is a number to be desired, coming at you live once again from the road in Houston, Texas. Today, I've taken the time to come by and see my very good friend, Alan Cunningham, the man who taught me to run live sound the way I know how to do it now, and also one of the heart and soul people behind Double J Studios right here in the historic Montrose area of Houston. How you been, brother?
I'm very good.
Fantastic. Now, last time we sat down and we talked a little bit about tracking and talked about some techniques, things like that.
Well, you were sitting down. I was driving.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You were on the road at the time, and it's the fact of I've showed quite a few people the tracks. Quite a few people have tuned into the show, and I've gotten a lot of comments on it from people who literally just cannot believe the fact that you not only played and sang everything on those tracks, but you also recorded, engineered, and mixed and mastered all of the tracks as well. And tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, one thing I'll say is, the playing, comes naturally. The songs that you played, they're both cover songs, obviously. So, I mean, it's not necessarily that I'm trying to go back and redo it. It's a lot of it has to do with the fact that I do it because I would rather experiment with and screw up on something I did than one of my clients, So if I'm going to experiment with a technique or something like that, I'll play with it myself first.
Absolutely.
And some things I just throw together in a couple hours, but, a couple of the tracks that you played, I've got some hours into.
Oh, yeah, most definitely, man. Especially the ones like Brandy.
Yeah. Brandy happened fast.
Really?
Yeah, I did Brandy in about 5 hours.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
But, there's some secrets in there that I'm not going to tell. But it's honestly, I think it's a pain in the ass to do something like that because, you're talking about having to be objective with yourself.
Yes.
With your playing, because every track on that thing was tracked at least twice. I laid down the track and I lived with it for about a week and I was like, nah, not so much.
Yeah.
And I went back and I listened to it again. Sometimes you got to get some distance.
You do. And, that's something that I actually recommend to everyone. Whenever I worked with you and Tie-Dyed Productions, something that we provided to people all the time was live recordings.
Yeah, totally.
We would, when the set was over, here's your CD. And I kind of took that to the next level whenever I started HT Productions and started doing instant live CDs and DVDs for sale to the bands, things like that. And, it's different whenever you're doing that.
And sometimes you'll go back a couple weeks later and you'll listen to the recording that you made 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
And, it's right when it sits with you.
Yeah.
By the way, this is Sue the Wonder Dog here. She is my couch potato and love sponge.
Well, and, the advice that I always gave bands whenever I sold them a recording, even whenever I've done rehearsal demos for bands, and, I always give everybody a stereo mix down on a thumb drive.
Yeah.
Bring your thumb drive, you'll get an immediate stereo mix down that you can at least go home and reference the work that was done, and we can do better mixing and mastering on each track, add effects, all that kind of stuff. But I normally tell them, go home, eat dinner, sleep, relax. Don't worry about this because it's done. Come back and listen to it tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Give yourself a day before you go through and listen to something because you can really start to pick yourself apart.
True. And I mean, if you do it immediately, that's one thing. If you're looking at it the next day and you're starting to mess with it, or I honestly recommend a week. Especially
if
it's
be that patient.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always make myself a mix. Because honestly, the stereo in my truck is my test bed.
Well, and it should be. I mean, that's been a mastering engineer's trick for years. Is car stereo.
What does it sound like in the car?
Well, because that's where 60-70% of music listening is
listened
done.
to. Yes.
And nowadays, to take it even further, you really need to put it on a cell phone.
Yeah, and I've done cell phones. I've done crappy ass little headphones.
Yep.
Earbuds. I've used all kinds of things. And if it sounds right in all of them, you're done.
Yeah.
Leave it alone.
Yeah. Quit picking at it. It won't heal.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. We know a little something about that.
That's it.
Trust me, I'm a welder. I you know.
Well, and it's just one of those situations that, as excited as you are to get it, you should really be excited to listen to it as well. But you have to listen to things with critical ears,
and not to mention,
come around to it.
You know, especially from an engineering aspect, you got to take an ear fatigue.
Yep.
You know, because you just came out of the studio for maybe 6 or 7 hours. Your ears are toast.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear anything worth a damn until at least the next day.
That's it.
It takes about 14 hours to get over ear fatigue.
Oh, most definitely. And, that's something that I try and drill into every musician that I work with, every engineer that I work with. They have some great tinnitus trainer apps and things like that now that really help you flex your ears. And after you've had a hard wash day behind the board, they really, it really kind of helps you to recover some of those frequencies and things like that that are being hushed out.
But I mean, it's not even that. I mean, your ears displaced. You could be listening at low volumes. And that's one thing you really need to take into consideration is that, even in listening at low volumes, your ears can become fatigued because after you've been focusing in on, particular sounds, nuances, and things like that, your ears are toast.
Yeah. Well, and I have to do the same thing whenever it's recommended for anybody in any industry like that, where if you do video editing, if you do graphic design, like
you were talking about earlier, the screen eyes.
Screen eyes, man. Right now, what's really funny, what's interesting is right now the location that we are in is directly above, and this happened totally by coincidence. The first time Alan contacted me and said, "Dude, you need to swing by the pad and hang out."
Yeah.
I swung by, he gave me the address, and I was like, that address sounds so familiar. And when I got here, I was like, oh my God, Alan, the guy who taught me to run live sound, literally lives above the suite where I learned to edit video. So, totally by happenstance. But yeah, whenever you're editing video, graphics, websites, you really, every 3 hours, need to get up, walk away. Get out of the electronic fog, go out, get some daylight,
drink a beer,
fresh air, have a drink, glass of tea, whatever your poison is, but, relax. Get away from it for a little while. And it wasn't until I started doing broadcasts and things like that I really because we used to hustle our way through some shows, my friend.
Oh, for sure.
There was no break for us. We would get there at 6:30 in the morning for Watermelon Festival, be setting up until noon, 1 o'clock, and then 2 days worth of bands.
Exactly.
I remember distinctly us pulling the van up behind last concert and taking shifts sleeping in the back.
Oh, dear God, yes.
If we even had time to take shifts to sleep.
Yeah, well, there was that one where we were just back to back.
Yeah.
You had one stage and I had the other.
We went and did South by, then we came back and did Watermelon.
Dude, I saw a blue gorilla running by the side of the van. I'm telling you.
I remember. It was
I was
nuts.
so fatigued.
We were
and we're not just talking about ear fatigue here. We're talking about bona fide fatigue.
Delirium.
Yes.
Like to the point that
I don't recommend this.
You're literally hallucinating things in front of your eyes because you're just so entirely worn out and tired. But it's interesting. I also shot some stuff with Billy Stewart from ScaryDad.com last night. And he's one of my oldest friends in the world. We went to high school together and just really, really grew up and came up in the arts community together, things like that. And it's the fact that it's seeing something through to completion. And it's something that you drilled into me with Tie-Dyed and something that I've said about HC Productions. The HC Productions motto has always been, on time is late.
Yeah.
If you're there, if the show starts at 9 and you're there at 8:55, you're late, dude.
Yeah.
We got tons of other stuff that's got to be done, gear that's got to be on for a couple hours before show.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like when we used to do the shows, we were set up 3-4 hours in advance, even before sound check.
That's it.
That was to ensure that anything that was possibly going to go wrong would happen immediately.
Yeah,
yeah.
It'll happen within the first hour of gear being on, typically.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a few.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
We had numerous times where, amps would start putzing out on one side. We'd have to switch over to bridged mono or something like that.
Well, we never had to do that. I mean, I did a pretty good job of keeping stuff maintained,
Well,
but there were other, snafus like, returns that needed to be resoldered on the fly.
Yeah. And you never know until you get there. It's funny to me. I do install work, and she's a little comfy, huh?
You think?
Yeah, sweet darling.
I told you she was a little
I do
sponge.
install work and maintenance work, and man, that's some of the most frustrating stuff in the world, because you walk in and, number one, you're stepping into another engineer's head.
Yeah.
And if you're married to an engineer and know an engineer, it's not really a head that you want to be in.
It's a very scary place.
It's a scary, lonely place in there. And, I've said it before on the podcast, it's not necessarily that audio engineers are that gripey, it's that we are that protective. Like, these systems are our babies.
Yes.
We have scoped them out. We have tweaked them to pristine condition and sound, and
when we start reading magazines and we start looking at spec sheets and things like that, because a spec sheet will tell you a lot, but it won't tell you everything.
No.
You can find the best damn spec sheet in the world, and if it doesn't, if you plug the piece of gear in, especially speakers, like loudspeakers, okay? A lot of times these spec sheets, and polar patterns get tweaked by the folks on Madison Avenue, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But the real proof in the pudding is when you set it up in the environment you're going to use it. Either it sounds good or it doesn't.
Yep. And being able to make those adjustments on the fly, to make those changes, to, calculate the speed of sound in the room that you're in, the resonant frequencies of the room and things like that.
Real-time analysis does come in handy, but, real-time analyzers are not the human ear.
They aren't. They aren't.
100% of what we're doing is for the human ear. It's not for the human ego.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me rephrase that. It shouldn't be for the human ego.
It shouldn't.
A lot of times it winds up being, I wanted to have more bass. Well, guess what? Your system sounds like crap, man.
Well, either that, or like my buddy who lives in Deep Ellum the other day, he was like, did I literally just have to get up, get dressed at 1 a.m. and go tell the club across the street what physics is like? Because it's an upstairs roof club and they have their bass pumped. And the roof is 25 feet deep. So standing bass waves don't come around till 40 feet. Like, nobody on that balcony is going to feel the bass. Like, you're trying to get, like you're trying to get it
Case
to where
in
people
point.
feel that thump. And it's like the only people feeling that thump are in the building.
Everybody across the way. Well, and okay, good case in point. These guys with these banging ass stereo systems in their car. And they've got 15s, like 6 of them in an SUV. Well, here's the thing. In that Dodge Ram van, there was always plenty of bass, wasn't there?
There was.
And it was because there was a single 8-inch speaker, a single 8-inch sub in the back. And it was because we were 15 feet away from said single 8, and I had it pointing in the opposite direction. These guys with these banging ass systems, all they're doing is they're giving themselves permanent hearing damage.
Oh, not
because,
just them.
You can hear the bass great when you're sitting on the other side of the intersection.
I had a guy pull up next to me literally about 3 weeks ago, and it blew my mind, man. I mean, the guy must have been stone deaf. He pulled up next to me in pulled up next to me in a Denali, right? And, beautiful car, and it's thumping and stuff, and I could feel it coming. It wasn't quite next to me yet. My windows were down. It's a nice day. And literally as he pulled up, you could see the cracks in the windows. So he had some pressure wave going on.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, it felt like somebody was jabbing a pencil into my eardrum. Like, the pressure waves coming off of his car were so massive that they were literally encapsulating me in my vehicle. And, like, pressurizing my eardrum.
That seriously pisses me off because I'm
like,
sorry, when I'm in my car, I want to hear my stereo,
I was like,
not somebody else's.
Well, I was just like, Lord have, God bless the guy. He must go to the Hudson Tellison School for the Deaf in Austin or something.
If he doesn't, you will soon.
You know, I was like, that is just insanity.
What makes me sicker than that is when I see people doing that with kids in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. Or dogs, even.
Exactly.
That's what gets me. Whenever I see
an animal, like, yeah, absolutely.
People, like, I understand, you know, Austin's a dog-friendly city. It's actually a no-kill city.
Yeah, Houston is becoming that way.
It is. And, you know, it's like, did you really just bring your dog into a 110 decibel rock and roll club? Yeah. Like, that is one of the cruelest things in the world you could do to that poor animal.
Pretty much. Now, Sue, she loves to listen to the radio as much as I do in the car. She looks at me funny if I don't have the stereo on.
Well, yeah, but ears 20 times better than you do.
Exactly. With ears like this, like satellite dishes, you know?
You know, it's like, you think about that, you know, it's really become an issue overall, across the board, man. Adults, kids, everybody, because we're so used to our mobile devices. We're so used to being in our own little world with the music and everything that, you know, it's like society goes to oblivion. Everything gets pushed to the side. Nobody's paying attention to each other. They're crossing the street listening to their iPod and texting.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, and everybody's in their own personal bubble. But, you know, to go back to one point, though, you remember I was saying about the kids in these cars?
Yeah.
That's right on the verge of child abuse.
Right on it.
You know, if anything, it is child abuse because you are permanently damaging your children's or your friends' kids or whoever's kids are in the car. You know, you are permanently damaging their hearing by exposing them to sound pressures well above what they can handle. And they can hear lots of things that you can't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, there are actually ringtones for your cell phone that are hyper-pitch that only people under the age of 19 can hear.
Yeah.
You know, because as you get older, your tympanic membrane gets a little bit less
It gets worn.
You know, you just like a diaphragm on a microphone or diaphragms in a pair of headphones, you know. Eventually they start to crackle a little bit.
Or the other diaphragm once it gets a little too old, you know. I
mean, you can't replace all of them. But
that's replaceable. That's replaceable. But when it gets just a little too stretched out, you know.
You know, it's the fact of, you know, good Lord, what about shaking the baby's brain? Did you even think about that? Like, you're literally shaking that kid's brain inside of his skull because he's right up against those subwoofers, man.
Not only that, but you're almost
jamming some Tupac.
Yeah. It ain't that good. I'm sorry, but, you know, give them a chance.
Leave Tupac
Give them a choice.
That's it. And you know,
I don't care what it is. It could be the Grateful Dead, and you know how much I love them.
That's
but, you know, it's not so great that you have to damage your child, you know, or the general public's hearing over it, you know.
And, you know, it really comes down to, and you've experienced it on stage, I know, because I've been there with you. I've experienced it on stage where it's literally just trying to get, hey, buddy, you know, if you could come down just like a notch on that amp. If you could come down just a notch, I'd be able to give your bassist over here a little bit more vocal in the monitor without having to gain you up. And
because after a while, you know, especially when you're dealing with loud bands, with loud stage volume, you know, the only thing that you can really combat them with after a while is just plain old brute force.
Yeah.
You know, but there's actually not a whole lot of difference in volume between, you know, 100-watt amplifier, you know, on stage, and then you put a mic in front of it with a 10,000-watt PA system. You're only going to get a 6 dB gain off it.
That's it.
But granted, sometimes that 6 dB is all you need to get over and above them. You know, but you shouldn't have to fight stage volume.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't, because you know the one thing that you drilled into my head more than anything, and that has been like rule of the universe for me since, is it's about quality of sound, not about quantity.
Yeah.
You can have it, just because something is ragingly loud doesn't mean you can hear everything. It doesn't mean that the sound is distinct, clear. You know
how you know you've got great sound?
Especially when bathroom and it sounds like a CD.
Nah, even better. It's even better than that.
That's normally my judge in the bar.
That's pretty good, but no, I mean, how you know you've got great sound, especially in a club environment, and how you know it is when it sounds good and crisp and clear, and it sounds like you could listen to it at that volume forever, but you go to talk to the guy sitting next to you, and he can't hear you.
Yeah.
And you can't hear him. But everything sounds fantastic. It's not fatiguing.
Nope.
It's not wanting to run you all the way to the back of the room. One of the problems I had, since I did a lot of outdoor sound, but one of the problems that I had was, with bass, with the subs, because people would be like, man, and of course they're right up on the stage, right up on the subs, man. They're like, man, I can't hear the bass. And my advice to them, step back off the subs about 12 feet and you will feel it. Because it takes a minimum of that far for, low frequency bass waves to develop to the point where your ears can hear them.
That's it. People forget the fact that bass travels at a different rate than treble.
Yeah.
It
also propagates different.
It does.
Bass tends to propagate 360 degrees, while when you start getting above, say, 1K, and of course the higher up in the spectrum you go, the more focused the sound waves are. That's why we use horns to disperse it, properly.
Right. That's right.
But you get to a certain frequency and, high frequency drivers will do what's called beaming. And they'll just blow it right down your throat. And it doesn't matter, excuse me, it doesn't matter what the frequency is. You can be sitting there and all of a sudden somebody will hit, a certain frequency on a guitar or some harmonics or something like that. And you're like, holy crap.
Like, oh, yeah. And, it's very easily done.
You can't prepare for every eventuality, but they try to do that when they design the horns. Yep. Because if you look especially at a high frequency driver, you notice that it focuses multiple frequencies. They're designed to focus multiple frequencies in a fairly even pattern.
Yeah.
And there is an exact science to that.
There is. Just the science of pressure waves and everything else and how they operate and reflect off of materials. And they're absorbed. And, like you said, having a big crowd, just
moving air baffles.
That's it.
That's what they are. They are moving air baffles.
Me and Kevin Nessel, a couple episodes, literally were talking about, sometimes the show would be so much better without that crowd that paid to be there.
Well, of course.
The sound would sound pristine because you aren't soaking up all my sound.
Well, you've got that, but one of the biggest, and that was one of the biggest problems with ground stack arrays. Mm-hmm. If you can fly them, if you can get them up and above people's heads, it's amazing how much better things sound the higher up you get the speakers.
Yep.
Because you can focus down at them.
Yeah.
But then you're looking at throw angle, you're looking at you've got a lot more variables. But let's face it, a ground stack array is right for certain things, but if it's not up and above people's heads, nobody's going to hear a thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Because what people do, one thing they do very well is between, the what people are made of, which is 70% water.
Yep.
Then throw the clothes on them and you've got acoustic baffling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're very highly effective acoustic baffles.
Yep. And, you were talking about going from outdoor to indoor.
Oh man.
And that was big for me because whenever I started with you, I had done some studio work on my own, things like that. We worked together in the studio, but you were the one that really got me full on into running live sound. And we were at an outdoor venue like 60%, 70% of the time.
Sure. We did a few indoors.
Yeah, we did a few indoors and stuff at events and stuff like that. But our typical venue that we were at with regularity, last concert was an outdoor venue.
Yes,
it's an outdoor space. And when I moved to Maine,
you're almost 100% indoors.
Oh no, man! It was literally like, here's a 30-foot deep, 10-foot high basement. Surrounded. That's nothing.
Cinder block.
Nothing but rock, man. Rock.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because some of those basements are older than the cinder block, really.
It was made out of rock, and then on top of that had wood paneling.
1970s vintage wood paneling.
Wait for it. With aluminum siding all the way around. Like right here behind your head all night long in that sound booth was aluminum siding.
Have you ever mixed in a beer can before? Yeah.
Like, man, we had heavy metal 3-4 nights a week. that my ears were more worn from the frequency of
I was going to say, something tells me your 800 hertz is about shot.
Oh, man, it just hearing that vibration right behind your head just all night long.
Let me tell you a little bit about my ears' history. Okay. Of course, I grew up listening to my brother's loud music, and then, of course, I started playing the drums at an early age, at the tender age of 9. So it's really surprising that after playing the drums, after being in the Army, being a machine gunner, qualified machine gunner, grenades and everything else, working in the motor pool as a diesel mechanic with diesel trucks that had no mufflers and turbos, on the back side of a flight line with turbine engines and UH-60As and AH-64s in Camp Humphreys, South Korea. Thank you very much, United States Army. It's a wonder that I can still go get an audiogram and my ears are, and oh, by the way, I currently manage a fleet of trucks, so I'm still around impact wrenches and everything else. Yep. I manage a shop full of trucks. So the fact that I still have my hearing and that I don't have any noticeable tinnitus.
Is incredible.
There's those couple of nights that I'm sitting there, laying awake at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I get just the little faint hum. And, that's it.
Mine has actually turned into the fact that, and it's weird. It's really weird. I would love to have it checked out, but as I've gotten older, it's gotten more acute.
Well,
and don't get me wrong. It's a muscle. I flex it. I use it. It's going to be sharper.
Yeah, but it's not just, it's the fact that you train yourself to hear these frequencies that other people ignore. They don't notice them. So when we go in and get an audiogram, something, they may have to pump up that 20K up, for a bit, but we'll hear it.
Yeah.
We will.
Mine is the fact that, I'll be laying in our 2-bedroom apartment with my wife, in bed, and I'll be
TMI, dude. TMI.
No, I'll be like, oh my God, those people. And she's like, what? What's going on? I'm like, you don't hear their conversation upstairs in the living room? I can literally hear my neighbors upstairs in their living room across the apartment, 2 rooms away.
It's really annoying too.
It's so entirely wearing to tune out. For me to go to the mall is even to go walk the mall for 15, 20 minutes for exercise is just so emotionally draining because I literally have to filter out every conversation around me.
Well, I mean, you can also wear filters.
Oh, yeah. You look a little foolish, but yeah, I could.
You know what? Screw them if they can't take a joke.
Yeah. I mean, I really need to start doing something like that because it's literally I'll be standing in line at the grocery store and it's I hear everybody's conversations all around me.
Including that one kid that's on aisle 16 screaming his fool head off for some candy.
Yeah, it's oh, my sweet Jesus, man. It's like a rabble of noise in my head all the time.
All the time.
And it's helpful, the whole ADD thing and all that, it really helps me be able to close my eyes and hear everything on a stage at the same time and individually at the same time. So for mixing, it's really handy.
Well, I mean, I use it every day at my job.
The rest of life, it drives me batty, man, hearing everything in the world.
Well, the thing is even at work, my guys come to me and they're mechanics, they're out there with these trucks every day. And I'll walk past a truck and say, you got an air leak.
Yeah. You can
they're like,
hear it.
You can hear that? And I was like, and what's even stranger is, they'll shut the truck off and I'll be like, you hear it? Do you hear where it's coming from? And I'll walk right over and put my hand on it and it'll go, shoo. It's like, there's your air leak, fix it.
And that's absolutely true. It really is. It's just like playing music. I was telling you earlier that, I've been writing a lot of my avant-garde stuff, things like that. But man, I can't remember the last time. It had to have been 2 years ago that I wrote a lyric song. Yeah. And you know me, at one point I was writing 3 a week, and it was just flowing, it was going.
Right, but you can't call it writer's block because you're still writing other stuff.
Yeah, I'm still writing other stuff, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it's a muscle. If you don't work it, you tend to lose it. I went to Maine for 5 years, and I guess now my Spanish is resultant in reading a menu. I still understand quite a bit. I still can read quite a bit, but for me to have a conversation in Spanish, gone. 5 years in Maine, totally shot that because I had no need whatsoever to speak Spanish to anybody. So,
well, in the job that I have now, I have actually to speak it fairly often.
Oh, absolutely.
I've gotten pretty good. So if you lost it, I found it.
You know, it's good. You use it regularly. It's just the fact that, you know, it's all a muscle. It's like riding a bike. You know, I could get on one, but I'd be wobbly for about the first mile, man.
I don't know, man. You know, I tried it the other day for the first time. And mind you, I've ridden motorcycles and all kinds of other stuff. And then there was several years where I just didn't do squat because I was buried underneath a rock. But the other day, I actually do own a bicycle. I bought a bicycle so I could ride it around this neighborhood.
You live in Montrose,
right? And you know, because of all my friends I've seen get smeared on bicycles in this neighborhood because nobody cares.
Yeah.
And that's why I have not taken my bike out. I've been afraid to. But I own one. Mm-hmm. I do.
Yep.
You know, and it's a fairly decent one.
Yeah. You know, it's the fact of you really have to discipline yourself. You have to discipline yourself to make sure to take time to, you know, to write music, if you write music, to play music, to listen to music,
to mix music.
To mix music.
Because if you don't do it, you know, it's all repetition.
That's it.
You know, muscle memory.
It's the 10,000 hours.
Yeah. Well, it's hand-eye ear coordination, you know, especially when it comes to playing and mixing. Because mixing is every bit as integral, you know, to making a recording as actually playing the tracks. You know,
yeah.
Again, and I've said it before, and I think I've said it before on this podcast, as a matter of fact, if you don't, you know, it's a lot like cooking.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't cook for a while, you get out of practice and you forget your taste, you forget your palate and everything else. Yeah. Well, audio engineers have a palate too, except instead of tasting it, we taste it with our ears.
Yeah.
You know, but is it too much reverb? Is it not enough? Is it, you know, are you really carving out spaces for each individual instrument? You know, what is it?
Yeah, are you slicing the pie properly?
Right.
So to speak?
Yes, very much. I mean, because, you know, it's like onions. Are you going to thinly slice them or are you going to dice them?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we go minced or chopped.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really does take a certain modicum of judgment whenever it comes to that stuff. And you have to... You like we started off saying, you know, it's about art, not about ego.
Right.
And
science.
And science.
Don't forget the science.
No.
Never forget the science.
About the science. And the fact that ego can so easily step in, so entirely easily, from both sides of the microphone. From both sides of the stage.
Oh my God! Yes.
And you know, I've worked with so many engineers.
I've been guilty of this.
Yeah,
I've been guilty of
it.
You know.
You know, and yeah, like I said, it's a fact of hey, this is my system. You know, and but we have to remember that it's our night.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
It's
a shared
song.
experience.
Yeah, it's our production. You know, and you know, it really is something that. You have to walk a fine line with whether it's live, whether it's in the studio. You really have to make sure.
I'm going to step off camera for just a second. Keep talking.
That the parts that are necessary and the parts that are done are absolutely necessary. You know, I mean, sometimes you have to strip a vocal track out because it just didn't fit the vibe. You know, like it was one too many female voices in the background.
Right.
And that is a reality. That's an absolute reality. Oh, sweet Jesus. He pulled out the Bible.
I want to show you guys this. All right. This book is best described as extremely outdated. Okay. This is the book by which I lived and died. And if you actually look inside my copy, you can see that I've made lots of little notes, you know, and, you know, I didn't even have a highlighter. So I just took a ruler and a pencil and I put my little notes in there, you know, basic gain structures, read me often.
Yep.
You know, and I haven't picked up this book, as a matter of fact, in a couple of years. I just thought about this just now, but I wanted to show you this.
Along those same lines and from the same company, the one that really got me going is The Musician's Guide to Home Recording.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my Bible. I mean, anytime somebody asks me to take them under my wing and teach them audio, that is the book that I get them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it'll cost you $24, maybe 18 or 15 at your local half-price books.
Oh, absolutely.
But it will give you so many tips and tricks on mic technique, you know, on how to place things in a rehearsal space,
there it
how
is
to build
right there.
floated walls, everything, drum and percussion miking. You know, these resources, these books, you can get them at your typical Guitar Center. You can get them at your typical Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all over the place. This one is the Live Sound Reinforcement course of technology from Cengage Learning. And it's no plug whatsoever there. It's just literally what we have both recommended to everybody who's asked us, how do you learn what you know?
Exactly. But the thing is there's, you know, you can go to all the schools in the world you want, but it's not going to give you can't buy a set of ears.
No, you can't.
You know, the other thing is, you know what? A lot of people would consider this book outdated because it was written, 20 years ago?
Well, yeah.
But here's the deal.
This one is, let's see, I want to say this is like the 4th edition or something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah. But here's the deal. The basic principles of audio have not changed.
No, the physics have not changed whatsoever.
Right.
And that's just it. The only difference is if you go out and buy the new version of this, you're going to see more digital consoles in it. You're going to see some DAWs, that kind of stuff. Same thing in the Musician's Guide to Home Recording.
Right. Some basic fundamental updates have been done, but the basic information has not changed since the first edition.
96 was the first edition of this book. And I know the one.
That is my second copy, by the way.
The original version of Musician's Guide to Home Recording, I think, was a couple years before this. Like literally the map paths that they show for signal path and everything show like, you know, analog tape and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
But the fact, and that's just it.
And the new ones go into DAWs, they go into MIDI syncing and, you know.
But the thing is everybody keeps trying to put, I'd mentioned this last time around, everybody keeps trying to put these plugins to get the old sound. You know what? You want to get the old sound? Read the old book.
That's it. Learn the old techniques and you'll get the old sound. And
study.
Even
listen.
Not too long ago, and I forget who it was that my buddy Wes, who works on the Marvel Universe tour, was like, oh, it was Ween. It was Ween telling me about like, oh yeah, you know what? I just found out like how they get their huge sound is that they use nothing but outboard gear. And I'm like, well, yeah.
But the thing is you can get that sound. But if you set up your structure, even in a DAW, if you set up your structure, if you think about things with an analog mind, you will get that analog sound. You can't buy a plugin that will give you the know-how. The only thing you can do is get in there and get your hands dirty.
Well, and it's also learning the things about like proper bleed through on microphones and all that kind of stuff, you know, because, you know, you do want some of that bleed through coming through on mics. You know, you don't always want dead silence on every track.
Don't gate the crap out of everything, especially with drums. If you gate it, you'll kill it. You know, you can use a gate for extra punch, but open up your overheads a little bit. Okay? That shave the low end off them so you're not getting so much tom ring, but the pow, the snap of the snare drum, especially when you're doing like cross stick technique, ghost notes, sure.
You know, light jazz, all that kind of stuff, man.
There's a reason why they only use three microphones. Kick and a pair of overheads. There's a reason for that. Because they want that open air sound. And a lot of times, especially I find out with my drum tracks, if I think it's sounding too dead, what I'll do is I'll open up the overheads. You know, also
liven it up. Ambient
track an ambient mic.
Absolutely,
you know, stick it somewhere in an absolutely. You know what? You don't have to do ambient mics. You know, to
I've got a realistic, and it's an old school realistic PZM microphone, like you know,
the good one
from the '80s that has like the solid steel.
That's the good one.
Like you know, you almost can't. Probably the Crown PZMs are close to them because I think that's what they were ripped off of. But or not ripped off of, designed off of, I should say, as a designer. But
whatever. Dude, there's nothing
I stand
there.
On the shoulders of geniuses with my designs. I won't lie. Everybody
well, you can
does.
stand on the shoulders of geniuses. I stand on the shoulders of freaks.
That's it.
Okay? Because when it comes to my techniques and stuff like that, I get my, you know, a lot of my hard-won knowledge and techniques from listening to the freaks. Brian Wilson. Phil Spector. Things like that. You know, I mean, the sound is timeless.
Dude, like one of my perfect examples is
Frank.
well, Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
But I mean, beyond that, Motown, man. Go through and listen to Temptations.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
But I think, I've been going back and
I'll Be There is the track that I'm thinking about, because there were literally like what, 3 microphones? There were 3 microphones in the whole studio for the entire band, and one of them was on a phone book. Like, literally, it was played with the dude's drumsticks on a phone book, and that was one of the only microphones on in the room, was that. But it sounds so great. And
they had all of 3 or 4 tracks to work with, you know?
Well, yeah, but, I mean, if you listen to those, sure, they sound a little boxy, you know, because of the room and the microphones and everything
but why don't you go back and listen to it through an old school jukebox? And what does it sound like? It sounds huge. Huge on a mono amp, man. You put it on a mono amp and nothing sounds like it. Yeah, exactly. And you listen to the stereo remasters and it's never the same.
No.
All right, here, case in point. All right, all the original Beach Boys shit was done in mono. Why? Because Brian Wilson couldn't hear out of one ear.
Yep.
You know, so if you're listening to a stereo mix of that shit,
not only
you're listening to a fake.
Not only that, but at the time that most of their material came out, you were hard pressed to find somebody that had a stereo in their car.
Yeah, exactly.
Most car stereos were still monophonic because it was still AM. There were so very few FM bands at the time.
Yeah, and there actually was a stereo AM for a very short period of time, but it obviously did not take off.
No.
I wish it had.
Hi-Fi took it over. I wish so too. Because I mean, the clarity on AM is better than FM.
It's It's a lot warmer. It's a lot more true to life.
It's a lot more bassy. I find it's got a lot more throat to it.
It's rich. Yeah. It's chesty.
Well, and it's because of the frequencies that it carries and the size of the waves.
But also it's because it's a modulated amplitude. It's amplitude modulation versus frequency modulation. Because with a frequency modulation, you actually do get a frequency shift. That's the ham radio nerd in me. But
these were our 3-hour-long conversations on car rides, man. God. This is how it got. Like,
this is how we made it back and forth to Austin to do this stuff.
Tech, man. But you know, it really is about learning techniques, learning tricks, tips. You know, learning how the engineers in the lab coats back in the day used to make stuff. You know, and literally, they were called audio engineers because the people who designed the equipment were the ones running the equipment.
Exactly.
You know, until the Beatles, and
pretty much,
you know. And it's a totally different world whenever you start getting into that stuff. It really changes perspective, outlook, and especially planning. You know, scoping gigs out, scoping out systems. Oh, yeah. You know, a lot of people just really want their system now. It's like,
you can want in one hand and
yeah, absolutely, and see which hand gets full faster. It's just the fact of, you know, there are so many things that go into it, you know, even especially running sound here in Houston, man.
Oh my God, dude.
Humidity. It's not just on your body, it's on your gear.
Yeah, here's one for you. Do you realize that as the ambient humidity goes up, so does the speed of sound?
Yes.
So, when you make those very precise little calculations for your you know, your speaker delays and things like that, guess what? Everything changes.
Running sound in the Rocky Mountains is totally different than running it here.
Absolutely. And why? Because the air is thinner.
It's thinner. It moves faster.
But right here on the Gulf Coast, you know, you're looking at 1,150 feet per second as compared to a drier area. When you get up towards the Panhandle, you're looking at 1,050.
Yeah.
So, you know, it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
And these little tiny, you know, microsecond calculations, do they make a difference? Do they really? Yes. Absolutely they do. So, I mean, you know.
It's the difference between a room verb and a slapback.
Exactly.
And it's in the milliseconds range. It's like, you know, thousandths of a second.
Yeah. You know, it's like I was telling Chris earlier, you know, one of the ways that I use recently, and this is something you can experiment with, especially with recording, is you can actually take 2 tracks, you know, the exact same track. You create, you know, you just copy another track into whatever DAW you're working with. All right. Leave the one straight up the middle and use a delay to, thicken the other one, you know, and I'm only talking like 2 or 3 milliseconds, but split it left and right and tell me that vocal doesn't sound huge.
Yep.
All right. And obviously seasoned to taste.
Yep.
You know.
Well, I mean, literally, and people don't understand that that's one of the biggest tricks in the book is it used to be called track bouncing, but it's just
nowadays just copy and paste.
Yeah, you literally take your vocal track, say copy, add track, pop it in there, and then just shift it by just a millisecond.
We're talking a fraction. A fraction of a amplitude rise on the wave.
Because if you put them on top of each other, you really make no appreciable difference.
Right, but if you knock them off,
there's a small gain increase, but it's not a oomph. It's not a thick.
The thing is, if something isn't 100% in phase, it's out of phase.
Yep.
Okay, so you're actually creating a slight phase shift, and the human ear is so accurate that a trained listener can actually tell.
Yep.
The precedence effect takes over. Does it sound like it's coming from over here? Does it sound like it's coming from over there in a mix? But a lot of times if you have that fundamental track right up the middle and then you alter the other, but you mix them back a little bit, you could get that thickening and at the same time get the broadness. When I mix vocals and things like that, it's funny because a lot of times I will use a stereo spatializer on the instrument portion of a mix.
Yep, absolutely.
But I will not use it on the vocals.
No.
The vocals, that's straight up pan.
Yep.
All I'm doing is panning it, and I'm very much traditionalist. The lead vocal goes in the middle. But let's say you've got a multi-performer group, where they take turns singing the lead. Okay, well, that's fine. I'll mix them in the center for their portion of the lead. But then when it comes back and they all come back and sing on the chorus, Crosby, Stills, and Nash style, I'll split them out.
Yep. Fan it out.
I will fan them out, but I won't fan them out to the point, so the band is like here, left and right, dead on left and right, or pretty much close to that, through the stereo spatializer. So they sound like they're over here, but that lead vocal needs to fit in the middle. So does the kick. So does everything that drives it. The snares needs to sit in the middle. The bass guitar needs to sit in the middle. Things like that. You can experiment with things like, and George Martin did this to great success. A lot of times there were this instrument over here and that instrument over there. The entire drum mix would be over here. The pianos would be over here. And when you combine them all together, they sounded great, especially in mono imaging. But in stereo, they worked. The reason being is because the early consoles didn't have a pan pot. They had a switch that went left or right.
Yep.
And there was no real mono center position. Because it was like black or white. There was no variance.
That's because originally most of the multi-tracks, if they had a left or right, it was because it was left, right side one, left, right side two. Because you would flip the tape. So you were basically using the 4 tracks of the tape and assigning it, track 1 will be left, track 2 will be right, and they're all going to spool the same direction.
Right. Now that, and of course then they did quadraphonic later, and
oh god, man, I wish that would come back. So hard, like it's beyond 7.8 or whatever this crap is now. All this digital mixing. I want to go back to straight up quadraphonic analog.
Well, and the strangest thing is a lot of people did that, for spatial and everything else. But let's face it, the human only has 2 ears.
Yep, you're only going to hear everything technically.
Yes, exactly. Because your ears, I don't know if you've noticed, but they're designed to reject sounds from behind you. You're still going to get some, but the precedence is in the front.
Well, and that's our that's literally our predator genetics.
Yeah.
Like it's too hard.
There's a reason our eyes are set so close together.
Yeah, we aren't looking to protect ourselves from the side like game.
Yeah.
We are the hunter.
And honestly, I have absolutely nothing against vegetarians or anything else like that. But to me, vegetarian is a word for bad hunter.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
I think it's Algonquin for
bad hunter.
Bad hunter.
That sounds about right. Considering I have Mi'kmaq roots, I tend to lean in that direction.
Right.
I have a friend of mine who's Lakota.
Oh,
he's 100% Lakota.
Wow.
100%. And I invited him over for fish one night. And then that is when I found out that in Lakota Society, they don't eat fish. Why? This is a real prize winner. Okay, so I asked him, I said, man, what's your beef against fish? And he said, well, you know, I don't really personally have a beef against fish, but, you know, given the choice between red meat and fish, I'm always going to pick fish. It's a society thing. And I'm like, oh, tell me. He said, well, in Lakota Society, if you're eating fish, it means that your wife has to go fishing because you're a bad hunter.
Yep.
So it was considered poor people food.
Yep.
So they tend to not eat it.
Yep.
You know.
Well, if I'm also not mistaken, was the gar not one of their totem animals as well?
Not from
Lakota.
Not Lakota.
No.
Yeah.
I might be thinking about
Seminole,
tribe.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because Lakota's up
Okay.
central. There's no gar up there.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But
Yeah,
when it comes to I digress. To get back into what's at hand, though, in all honesty, sounds what you make it. If it sounds right, it's right. If it doesn't sound right, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
But, you can use the science of sound to enhance the art. It's just like, you can paint with mud or cow poop or something like that if you really felt like it.
Well,
it's art.
That was the it's funny. That was a conversation that we were having last night on the recording, was the concept of art. And, we were talking about, just music in general and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, my buddy Billy was talking about how to him it's art if it's of appreciable value, if it's considered beautiful.
Right. But what's appreciable value to you may not be appreciable value to me or to the dog.
Those are all quantitative terms.
Yeah.
Or qualitative, rather.
Because, think about somebody like Sue over there. You know what?
Those are all the same as time. It's relative to the observer.
Exactly.
And that's what I said.
If you have no concept of time or space or anything else.
Seeing the Pietà in person moved me to tears. The dude next to me was like, well, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all how you impact people. And, you used to hear me talk about my dad all the time. Like, whenever I was on the radio right up the road on KPFT with my avant-garde music. Well,
Amen.
Why don't you make some music people can dance to with a beat or something? And I'm like, well, if I made music simply for other people to enjoy all the time and to seek their approval, I don't think I would be doing my job as an artist. Art is created for art's sake. If your intent is to be an artist and be rich, you're going to die poor, dude. Like, there were very few artists who had like the Medici backing, or were like Beethoven or Mozart, where they actually had
were church and government backed.
Well, and not just that, they had private people that they wrote quartets for their cotillions and things like that. So,
take for instance somebody like Johann Sebastian Bach.
Exactly.
Okay? I'm being an organ player, I'm very much a fan of Bach. Mm-hmm. And consequently later, guys like, absolutely. PDQ Bach and all that other stuff.
Yeah, that's it.
But the thing is even Bach got to the point where the church was not happy with what he was doing.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, they forbade him for a while from composing because why? Because they thought his music was too racy.
Well, it was after the Magic Flute, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's literally the fact of art, just like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder.
Or the eye of the beer holder.
Yes, or the eye of the beer holder. And it's, hey, not everybody's into Pantera, but they obviously had a following.
Well, I don't particularly care for gangster rap, but I tell you what, I can appreciate any form of music, especially, I can listen to something and even if it's not my cup of tea, I can tell you if it's good music or if it's, back to the drawing board, guys, you know.
Yeah, you don't, even to be a producer, you don't have to, you can't pigeonhole yourself. You really do have to be familiar with numerous types, especially as an engineer, especially as a producer. You got to know a little bit about everything, man.
You have to adapt to your situation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, because I mean, my personal preference is roots rock and things like that. I'm a bona fide Deadhead, and all that other stuff. But for a while there, I was kind of known as a hip hop engineer.
Yeah.
For another period of time, you know, I got really into jam bands, and that, of course, that's more my cup of tea. And you know, a lot of jam bands were calling me to have them mix them, stuff like that. Jazz, blues, rock, doesn't matter. I don't care what you're into. You better be familiar with all forms.
That's it.
You know, I did one South by Southwest that I was called on to do entirely hip hop acts for 4 days.
Yep.
And you know what? I had a blast.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite kind of music, but I had a really good time.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing that's more important to me than anything else, especially if you're working on somebody else's payroll, you please that customer. You know, I don't care if it's, you know, somebody like Eminem or if you're, you know, mixing for Toby Keith. You know what? They should feel like you care about them, like you care about what they're doing. If you want that gig again next time, you know, when they come back through, you care about what you're doing. You give every person, you know, everybody should feel like a rock star when they get up onto your stage.
That's it.
Everybody should feel like a rock star. Everybody should feel like you are their primary focus. You know, because you're not there to mix that show for you. You're there to mix that show for them.
That's right.
You
Absolutely. Know? And, you know, speaking about things that are not for you, that are for them, please, everybody, please, go by and visit us online, www.talkingsoundshow.com. There online, you can find everything from the technical articles to the news releases from major manufacturers like Mogami, Shure, Audio, Neve, all kinds of people. You can also listen to the podcast for free. The free downloads are available there. You can also watch all of the video episodes as well and special features. Also on our website is a link to our Patreon page. Please, please come by, visit us on Patreon. If you're a fan of the show, if you like the podcast, this is how we are supported. We have a few sponsors. We're working on some more, but right now, really, it's about you guys. It's about everybody that we provide things for, and we really want to make sure that everybody has a chance to be a part of that. And support for your local networks, support for independent artists is really what this is all about. And you know, much like the KPFT station that Alan and I used to work with right up the road, it's listener supported here.
Right.
And if you like the information, if you like what we're doing, if you like the technical videos, please visit us on Patreon. There we have fundraisers for the upcoming Talking Sound app that's already on the 5 test devices and going great. We can't wait to get that launched. We're only a few $100s away from the existing goal. We also have fundraisers for monthly expenses, you know, for the space that we record in, for upcoming gear costs, all that kind of stuff. So if you would like to be a part of the podcast, please help us out. Also, feel free to comment anytime. So, man, on that note, Alan, once again, dude, font of knowledge as always, brother.
Always a good time.
And most
always a stream of consciousness, weirdness, and I love it.
It's great. It's great. It's beautiful. It's awesome. And I can't wait till the next time. So hopefully next time we're here in Houston, we can actually come by the studio, get some footage there in the studio and all that.
Oh, I'd love to. You know, I got amazing stuff to show you, man.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait for it. Take care, my friend. And until next time, everybody, please keep on reaching for 11. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace.